book of Enoch, the book of the heavenly luminaries, chapter 72, the sun, the book of the courses of the luminaries of the heaven, the relations of each, according to their classes, their dominion, and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their laws, exactly as they are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world and unto eternity, till the new creation is accomplished, which dureth till eternity. And this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary, the sun, has its rising in the eastern portals of the heaven, and its setting in the western portals of the heaven. And I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises, and 6 portals on which the sun sets, and the moon rises and sets in these portals, and the leaders of the stars, and those whom they lead, 6 in the east, and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also, many windows to the right and left of these portals. And first there goes forth the great luminary, named the sun, and his circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating and heating fire. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and the sun goes down from the heaven and returns to the north in order to reach the east, and so is guided that he comes to the appropriate portal and shines in the face of the heaven. In this way he rises in the first month in the great portal, which is the fourth, those 6 portals in the cast. And in that 4th portal, from which the sun rises in the first month, are 12 window openings, from which proceed a flame when they are opened in their season. When the sun rises in the heaven, he comes forth through that 4th portal, 30 mornings in succession, and sets accurately in the 4th portal in the west of the heaven. And during this period, the day becomes daily longer, and the night nightly shorter to the 30th morning. On that day, the day is longer than the night by a 9th part, and the day amounts exactly to 10 parts, and the night to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 4th portal, and sets in the 4th, and returns to the 5th portal of the east 30 mornings, and rises from it, and sets in the 5th portal. And then the day becomes longer by 2 parts, and amounts to 11 parts, and the night becomes shorter, and amounts to 7 parts, and it returns to the east, and enters into the 6th portal, and rises, and sets in the 6th portal 1 and 30 mornings on account of its sign. On that day, the day becomes longer than the night, and the day becomes double the night, and the day becomes 12 parts, and the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. And the sun mounts up to make the day shorter than the night long and the night longer, and the sun returns to the east and enters into the 6th portal, and rises from it and sets 30 mornings. And when 30 mornings are accomplished, the day decreases by exactly 1 part and becomes 11 parts, and the night 7. And the sun goes forth from that 6th portal in the west and goes to the east and rises in the 5th portal for 30 mornings and sets in the west again in the 5th western portal. On that day, the day decreases by 2 parts and amounts to 10 parts, and the night to 8 parts. And the sun goes forth from that 5th portal and sets in the 5th portal of the west and rises in the 4th portal for 1 and 30 mornings on account of its sign, and sets in the west. On that day, the day is equalized with the night and becomes of equal length, and the night amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. And the sun rises from that portal and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises 30 mornings in the 3rd portal, and sets in the west in the 3rd portal. And on that day, the night becomes longer than the day, and night becomes longer than night, and day shorter than day, till the 30th morning, and the night amounts exactly to 10 parts, and the day to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 3rd portal, and sets in the 3rd portal in the west, and returns to the east, and for 30 mornings rises in the 2nd portal in the east, and in like manner sets in the 2nd portal in the west of the heaven. And on that day the night amounts to 11 parts, and the day to 7 parts. And the sun rises on that day from the 2nd portal, and sets in the west in the 2nd portal, and returns to the east into the 1st portal for 1 and 30 mornings, and sets in the 1st portal in the west of heaven. And on that day the night becomes longer, and amounts to double of the day, and the night amounts to exactly to 12 parts, and the day to 6. And the sun has therewith traversed the division of his orbit, and turns again on those divisions of his orbit, and enters that portal 30 mornings, and sets also in the west opposite to it. And on that night has the night decreased in length by a 9th part, and the night has become 11 parts, and the day 7 parts. And the sun has returned and entered into the 2nd portal in the east, and returns on those his divisions of his orbit for 30 mornings, rising and setting. And on that day, the night decreases in length, and the night amounts to 10 parts, and the day to 8. And on that day, the sun rises from that portal, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises in the third portal for 1 and 30 mornings, and sets in the west of the heaven. On that day, the night decreases, and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts, and the night is equal to the day, and the year is exactly as its day, 364. And the length of the day and of the night, and of the shortness of the day and of the night arise. Through the course of the sun, these distinctions are made. So it comes that its course becomes daily longer, and its course nightly shorter, and this is a law in the course of the sun, and his return, as often as he returns 60 times, and rises, the great luminary, which is named the sun, for ever and ever. And that which thus rises is the great luminary, and is so named according to its appearance, according as the Lord has commanded, and he rises. So he sets and decreases not, and rests not, but runs day and night, and his light is sevenfold brighter than that of the moon. But as regard to size, they are both equal. Chapter 73. And after this law, I saw another law, dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon, and her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to her in definite measure. And her rising and setting change every month, and her days are like the days of the sun, and when her light is uniform, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun, and thus she rises, and her first phase in the east comes forth in the 30th morning, and on that day she becomes visible, and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon, on the 30th day, together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And the 1/2 of her goes forth by a 7th part, and her whole circumference is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, and the 14th part of her light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part, and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and when the sun rises, the moon rises with him, and receives the half of 1 part of light. And in that night, in the beginning of her morning, in the commencement of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun, and is invisible that night with the 14 parts and the half of 1 of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a 7th part, and comes forth and recedes from the rising of the sun, and in her remaining days she becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts. Chapter 74. And I saw another course, a law for her, and how according to that law she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel who is leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me, and I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights, till 15 days were accomplished. In single 7 parts she accomplishes all her light in the east, and in single 7 parts accomplishes all her darkness in the west. And in certain months she alters her settings, and in certain months she pursues her own particular course. In 2 months the moon sets with the sun, in those 2 middle portals, the 3rd and the 4th. She goes forth for 7 days, and turns about, and returns again through the portal, where the sun rises, and accomplishes all her light, and she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days enters the 6th portal, from which the sun goes forth. And when the sun goes forth from the 4th portal, she goes forth 7 days, until she goes forth from the 5th, and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal, and accomplishes all her light, and she recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days. And she returns again in 7 days into the 4th portal, from which the sun goes forth. Thus I saw their position, how the moons rose, and the sun set in those days. And if 5 years are added together, the sun has an overplus of 30 days, and all the days which accrue to it for one of those 5 years, when they are full, amount to 364 days. And the overplus of the sun and of the stars amounts to 6 days. In 5 years, 6 days every year come to 30 days, and the moon falls behind the sun and stars to the number of 30 days. And the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the year with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years, there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years, 1,820 days, so that in 8 years, there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the day amounts in 3 years to 1,062 days, and in 5 years, she falls 50 days behind, i.e., to the sum of 1,770, there is to be added 1,062 days. And in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon the days in 8 years amount to 2,832 days. For in 8 years she falls behind to the amount of 80 days. All the days she falls behind in 8 years are 80. And the year is accurately accomplished in conformity with their world stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the portals through which the sun rises and sets 30 days. Chapter 75. And the leaders of the heads of the thousands, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days, being inseparable from their office according to the reckoning of the year. And these render service on the 4 days which are not reckoned in the reckoning of the year. And owing to them, men go wrong therein. For these luminaries truly render service on the world stations, one in the first portal, one in the third portal of the heaven, one in the fourth portal, and one in the sixth portal. And the exactness of the year is accomplished through its separate 364 stations. For the signs and the times and the years and the days the angel Uriel showed me, whom the Lord of glory hath set forever over all the luminaries of the heaven, in the heavens and in the world, that they should rule on the face of the heaven and be seen on the earth, and be leaders for the day and night, i.e., the sun, moon, and stars, and all the ministering creatures which make their revolution, and all the chariots of the heaven. In like manner, 12 doors Uriel showed me, open in the circumference of the sun's chariot in the heaven, through which the rays of the sun break forth, and from them is warmth diffused over the earth, when they are opened at their appointed seasons. And for the winds and the spirit of the dew, when they are opened, standing open in the heavens at the ends, as for the 12 portals in the heaven, at the ends of the earth, out of which go forth the sun, moon, and stars, and all the works of heaven, in the east and in the west. There are many windows open to the left and right of them, and one window at its appointed season produces warmth, corresponding as these do to those doors from which the stars come forth, according as he commanded them, and wherein they set corresponding to their number. And I saw chariots in heaven running in the world above those portals, in which revolve the stars that never set, and one is larger than all the rest, and is that which makes its course through the entire world.